Hey everyone, welcome to Dalton Draws, a series where the title tells you exactly what the show is. This is part of a 5-episode series for Super Smash Bros. Each episode will cover characters introduced in a different game in the series. This week's episode focuses on the original 12 fighters from the first game. To start, let's look at this poster. I didn't end up recording the process of sketching it out, but it took about 3 hours or so of looking at the Smash Bros. Website and making super rough sketches of each character. I should note that this was drawn on August 8th, so it was before the final characters were revealed. I also obviously can't account for DLC characters yet, aside from Piranha Plant. From there, I took each character out of the poster and into separate files to redraw them. Each character is both part of the poster and a separate illustration. If you want to keep up with these drawings as they're released, follow me on Twitter. I also release some of these early on Patreon in the weekly updates, available to all patrons. For working on these sketches, I'd find the full character renders and use them as reference for the more detailed characters, while for simpler characters, I'd draw them mostly from memory and make corrections in the final version. Each character sketch took about 10 minutes at most. After everyone from the 64 roster was sketched, I started drawing the full versions. I usually recorded in sessions of about 3 to 4 characters at a time. First up is, of course, Mario. I didn't use any reference for him in the sketch, but I did use reference to get the colors right. The Smash Bros. Version of Mario has a bit of a darker color palette than in the proper Mario games. In the games, Mario is one of my go-to characters. He's basic, but he's fun to use. I especially liked using customs in Smash 4 to max out his speed stat, so he'd jump absurdly high. That made for some chaotic matches. I've never played much of DK in the Smash Bros. Games. I loved the Donkey Kong Country games, and I liked DK as a character, but his playstyles never really clicked with me. The most I've really used him was for some of those challenges in Melee and Brawl where you had to survive for like 15 minutes in the multi-man battles. Link was definitely the most time-consuming of the original 12 to draw. His design from Breath of the Wild has a lot more to it than your typical Link design. It's one of my favorites, but it also meant more work for me. In addition to using a Smash Bros. Render for reference, I also had to use some screenshots from Breath of the Wild. I don't play as Link a ton in Smash Bros. Mostly just used him in 64 and Melee, since I liked his Ocarina of Time design. If I want to play Link, usually I'll stick with Toon Link, but who knows, maybe that'll change with Ultimate. Speaking of characters I don't play much, here's Samus. Gonna get a little controversial here and say I don't really care about the Metroid series. It just doesn't interest me. I won't deny that they're great games, just not for me. I do wish Ultimate had used Samus's design from Samus Returns though. That one looked really cool. I should note that I'm not drawing Dark Samus in this video. Echo Fighters will be waiting for the final episode, since they're making up a large portion of Smash Ultimate's newcomers. With Yoshi, I ended up changing the pose pretty drastically. The original fit a bit more with his portrayal in art for Yoshi's Island, but he's usually more energetic than that. Yoshi isn't one of my mains, but he is one of my favorite Mario characters. Similar to Mario himself, one of my favorite ways to play him was with customs in Smash 4. He had a variation of his tongue attack where the egg would get launched sideways, and it was always hilarious to get a KO with that. Kirby was probably the fastest character to draw, unsurprisingly. He's simple, but it's always fun to draw him. I don't play his games, but I love the visual design of the series. Fox was interesting to draw. I haven't been a big fan of his design post-Melee. It's interesting to think about how his design might be way different nowadays if Star Fox Command hadn't come out. That design ended up being the basis for Brawl in Smash 4, and it also seems like the one that most influenced Star Fox Zero as well. If Command hadn't come out at that time, it's likely his Brawl design would have been based on Star Fox Assault instead, and chances are that would be the design that carried on to this day. In terms of actual gameplay, Fox has always been one of my favorites. I just wish they'd bring back Sector Z as a stage. I've always preferred it to Corneria. Pikachu was fun to draw, but remember how I mentioned that I didn't use reference for the simpler characters? That came back to bite me a bit here. I pulled up reference for the final version to make the face a bit more accurate, and realized that the pose was actually pretty similar to the official render. Typically I've been trying to avoid that, so I ended up changing the pose a bit. I've never played much with Pikachu in Smash Bros, but I'll always associate the character with spamming Thundershock and Thunder in Smash 64. Ah, the king of second bananas. I love playing as Luigi in Super Smash Bros. He's just so bizarre, and I love how with every game they've made him and Mario more and more distinct from each other. Outside of Smash, he's one of my favorite Mario characters. It's just such a shame he so tragically died in the August 8th Direct and won't be returning for Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. I haven't played Earthbound, but Ness has always been one of my favorite characters in Smash Bros. I remember as a kid I had so much trouble trying to unlock him. I didn't even know it was possible until I checked out this one Pokemon-themed tip book at the school library. It had a section about how to unlock everyone in Super Smash Bros. I remember finally unlocking him at a neighbor's house and then going home right after to try and unlock him in my own copy of the game. And now for arguably someone more representative of Smash Bros. At this point than his own series, Captain Falcon. One of my absolute favorite characters to play as, ever since Smash 64. He's fast, he's powerful, he's just awesome. And that's not even counting the Falcon Punch. He's not my main, but he's definitely up there. And then there's Jigglypuff to round out this roster. Pun intended. And once Jigglypuff was finished, we reached the final step for this video. Taking those 12 completed fighters and putting them in the poster. Some of the placements had to be adjusted, and that'll be the case throughout this series. I'm still not decided on where to place Echo Fighters in the final version, but I'm thinking of just sorting everyone out by the game they were introduced in and leaving it at that. Hey everyone, welcome to Dalton Draws, a series where the title tells you exactly what the show is. This is part of a 5-episode series for Super Smash Bros. Each episode will cover characters introduced in a different game in the series. This week's episode focuses on the characters added to the series in Super Smash Bros. Melee. Just like in the first episode, I took the characters out of the sketch for the full poster, put them into a new canvas, and expanded each sketch to fill out their pose. Unlike with the Smash 64 cast, though, I don't think there was anyone I was able to sketch without reference. The more simple designs I'm not 100% familiar with, and some characters with simple designs in their own games have more complicated designs in Smash Bros. Pichu and Mr. Game & Watch possibly could be drawn without reference, but I still wanted to get the proportions correct. I should also note once again that Echoes will be waiting for the final episode, especially since there's a bunch for Melee characters. Then, with everyone sketched, I moved on to the proper illustrations. Peach is one of those characters I was referring to, who has a simple design in the mainline Mario series, but a much more ornate look in Smash Bros. I love playing her in Smash Bros. She's got a very silly moveset, and I like the sassier personality she has in these games. I don't really bother with the turnip attack much, but I do love the rare time you pull up a Bob-omb instead. That's good for a laugh. She's also one of my favorites to play in the sports games. I might make her one of my mains in Ultimate. I love how Bowser is represented in the Smash Bros. Series and his more vicious, threatening design. He's fun in the RPGs, but in the main series he's not much of a threat and not super interesting. I especially love the introduction of Giga Bowser in Melee. Bowser growing to monstrous sizes isn't unique to the series, but Giga Bowser is a much cooler way of doing that. And after some of the stuff in Super Mario Odyssey, I don't think it'd even be out of place in the main games. Bowser is fun to play in Smash, though I do miss his weird little slide across the ground from Melee. I don't play the Ice Climbers much at all, to be honest. They're an alright inclusion, and I definitely missed them in Smash 4, but they aren't one of my mains. I wasn't a fan of their stage in Melee, but Summit from Brawl is great, and the revamped version in Ultimate looks so good. They were fun to draw, and they're fun to play as, even if I'm not great with them. Glad they're back, they're staples of the series at this point. Okay, so for some reason Sheik comes before Zelda in the official numbering for Smash Ultimate. I thought maybe she appeared first in the Melee intro or something, but nope. Zelda appears immediately before Sheik in that. So I looked a little bit more and found that Sheik actually appears first in the E3 trailer for Melee, which the intro is based on. The shot of Zelda from the intro is a shot of Sheik in that trailer instead. It's not too exciting, but, it's still kind of interesting. I don't play Sheik much in the Smash Bros. Games, but Sheik is cool. Kinda wish they had gone with the design from Hyrule Warriors, though. That one is really cool. Plus, it would have fit in with how Ultimate is handling Zelda characters. The Ultimate design is based on the Sheikah armor from Breath of the Wild, but it would have been cool to represent that spin-off instead. Oh well. Speaking of which, I love the design they chose for Zelda. While my personal favorite design for her comes from Skyward Sword, the one from Link to the Past and Link Between Worlds is also fantastic. The way they adapted it for Smash Bros. Looks great. I've never played much of Zelda in the previous Smash Bros. Games, and part of that is because I just wasn't a fan of her design in those games. The Ocarina of Time one was fine, I guess, but I really don't like the design from Twilight Princess. That's also going to come up a bit later with Ganondorf. I'm so glad they finally changed up the designs for these characters with Ultimate. The Twilight Princess designs just aren't very interesting. What's up, Doc? Honestly, out of all the characters in the series, I feel like Dr. Mario is one of the weirdest inclusions. Like, yeah, he's a clone, but not an Echo Fighter. But he's literally the exact same person as another character in the roster. That's just a little bizarre, you know? Still, I actually kind of prefer Dr. Mario to regular Mario. I don't play him as much, but I like that he doesn't have Flood. Though on that note, why does Mario still have Flood? I feel like they should give him the hammer, since he's had it in pretty much every RPG. It's just more representative of him. But I digress. I never play as Pichu for obvious reasons, and yet I love that he's back in Ultimate. He's pretty much a joke character, but that's alright. I also love that he has a Team Skull costume in Ultimate. That's just great. I kinda preferred Falco to Fox back in Melee. Nowadays I'd rather play Fox. A few of the changes made to distinguish the two over the years have just made me prefer the original character. He's one of my favorite Nintendo characters though. It's not that common to have a Nintendo hero who's also just kind of a jerk. Most of them are either silent protagonists or just generic nice guys. I mean, I guess you don't play as Falco so he's not a protagonist, but he still counts. I recall playing as him a lot in Star Fox Assault's multiplayer. Which, if you haven't played that, do yourself a favor and play it. It's so much fun, and that's part of why it's my favorite Star Fox game. Marth was one of the most interesting inclusions in Melee to me. I had no familiarity with the Fire Emblem series at that point. I played Melee a lot later than most people, so I didn't get a GameCube until 2004. And at that point, Fire Emblem had debuted in the US, but I still hadn't heard of it, and we wouldn't get Marth's game until a few more years after that. Nowadays, I'm a big fan of the series. Like a lot of people, I got into the series with Awakening, but out of the 3 games on 3DS, my favorite has to be Echoes. It was just such a big step up for the presentation. I still want to go back and play some of the older games too. When I eventually get to Ike, I have a bit of a story to tell about trying his game. But back to Marth, I love his red and black designs from Melee. Most of my familiarity with him doesn't come from Smash or Fire Emblem though, it actually comes from Codename Steam on the 3DS. I wasn't a big fan of Young Link in Melee, but I'll probably play him more in Ultimate. I'd rather play as an adult Link, but he's the only option for playing as the Hero of Time incarnation of the character. I like how because of the changes to Link in Ultimate, him and Young Link are now a little more distinct. I of course grew up with the N64 Zeldas, especially since I didn't get a GameCube for years. I got stuck in Ocarina of Time for a while as a kid because I was scared of the Wall Masters, and in that time I picked up Majora's Mask, which is arguably the scarier game, but I had less trouble with it at the time. Both are real classics, and I love the 3DS remakes. I am so glad Ultimate brought Ganondorf back to his Ocarina of Time design. The Ganon from Twilight Princess is so bland and generic, he just looks like your standard evil lord kind of villain. The Ocarina of Time design just has more personality, and it's more fitting for how he plays in Smash Bros. As someone who mostly grew up with the N64 games, this is always the design I go back to for Ganondorf, though the Wind Waker one is pretty good too. In the Smash series, he's fun to play as, though him being a clone of Captain Falcon is a little weird. The more they've distinguished him over the years, the more interesting he's gotten. I like the sound of the changes they've made in Ultimate, so I can't wait to try him out again. Similar to Ness, I remember it took forever to unlock Mewtwo. That's something I kinda miss with the later games, trying to figure out how to unlock everyone. But with the internet nowadays, a lot of that magic is gone because the info is easily accessible. Mewtwo has always been one of my favorite Pokemon, partially because of the first movie, but I don't play him in Smash. He's just too floaty. I liked him a bit more in Smash 4, but he's not someone I'd play much. It's our boy Roy. I really don't have much to say about him, just like with Marth. I haven't had a chance to play any of the GBA Fire Emblems yet. I want to go back to them at some point, but my only options are to find a physical copy or download it on the Wii U, and I really don't want to use my Wii U much anymore. In terms of Smash Bros though, I've always preferred him to Marth. He's just more fun to use. I love how explosive all of his attacks are. that makes him stand out from the other sword users. He was one of the melee characters that took the longest to draw. I think the only other one that took this long was Ganondorf, who took about 2 hours. Roy took about an hour and a half. The two of them were also recorded in the same session, so that took a bit. And now, from one of the slowest characters to draw to one of the fastest. Mr. Game & Watches, oh, would you look at that? We're out of time and he's already done. On to editing the poster. I had to move some characters a bit more this time. When I did the main sketch, I wasn't sure how many Echo Fighters there'd be, so I just incorporated the melee ones down here from the start. I think it works better without them though, and it ended up taking a little less room than expected. Which is good because there's still a lot of characters to draw. Hey everyone, welcome to Dalton Draws, a series where the title tells you exactly what the show is. This is part of a 5-episode series for Super Smash Bros. Each episode will cover characters introduced in a different game in the series. This week's episode focuses on the many fighters added in Super Smash Bros. Brawl. Sketching out all of the characters Brawl added took quite a while. Not as long as the sketches for Part 4, but this episode had more characters than either of the previous 2 games. There's also the fact that starting with the Brawl roster, there's some characters with alternative versions that needed to be drawn, even though those alts weren't in Brawl itself. Alternate characters are going to be a much bigger part of the Smash 4 episode, but we're going to get our first glimpse of that here. For Pokemon Trainer, I had to draw all 3 Pokemon, plus the male and female trainers. For Olimar, I also drew Alf. As a rule of thumb going forward, I will be drawing alts only if they change the name the announcer is using or if the character has a gender-swapped counterpart. I won't be drawing all 8 villagers, for instance, just 1 male and 1 female villager. Part of this is that the poster is crowded as is, and it just opens the door for more technicalities for alt characters. Like, the links all have a dark link color variation, but I'm not going to draw those since it doesn't change the character name. Or another example, the different colored Yoshis are all different characters, but I'm not going to draw all 8 of them. But enough talk about technicalities, let's get into the full illustrations. I don't play Meta Knight often, but I do like him as a character. I've mentioned in previous episodes that I don't play the Kirby series, but after seeing him in Brawl, I got more interested about his origin. But out of all of the Brawl characters, he's probably the one I have the least to say about. Well, aside from maybe Lucas, both are characters I barely play from games I haven't played. I didn't like Pit in Brawl. He was loud, had a very spammy moveset, and I wasn't familiar with the Kid Icarus series. Then Kid Icarus Uprising came out, and now Pit is probably my favorite Nintendo character. They gave him such a fun, dweeby personality in that game, and it definitely helps that he's the star of my favorite video game ever. I went into Kid Icarus Uprising expecting to enjoy it just fine, thinking it'd be the length of, say, a Star Fox game. I wasn't expecting the massive, epic, hilarious adventure it turned out to be. I even had an easy time adapting to the game's controls thanks to working with Flipnote Studio on the DSi for years. Holding a 3DS like that was basically second nature to me. The story, characters, world, music, all of that just came together so perfectly, and that's saying nothing about the fantastic multiplayer mode. I still play Light vs. Dark with friends to this day. I hope someday Uprising can get an HD version on the Switch. One last note, Dark Pit will be in the Smash 4 episode, and I'm drawing echoes in the game they're introduced in. Zero Suit Samus is cool, though she kinda goes back to that same observation I made about Dr. Mario. It's bizarre having 2 characters who are literally the exact same person on the roster. Then again, there's 3 Links on the roster, so anything goes, I suppose. Regardless, she's a cool character and fun to play as. I remember being so surprised when I saw her in the Brawl announcement trailer. I knew Samus was a girl in a suit, but I don't play the Metroid games and didn't know Zero Suit Samus was even a thing. I thought this was something new they had made for Smash Bros. Because, again, I don't play those games, so I wouldn't have known. I'm glad they made her a separate character from regular Samus, though. I wasn't a fan of switching with the final Smash. Wario certainly made quite the entrance in that same trailer. I hadn't played WarioWare or Wario Land or any of the Wario spin-offs, so my only familiarity with him was from Mario Party and sports games. I don't think I'd ever seen his biker design from WarioWare, but it looked cool. Nowadays, I've played a bit more of WarioWare. I especially put a lot of time into WarioWare DIY on the DS, and that was so fun for someone like me who wanted to try making games. In the Smash series, he's pretty fun to use, though my favorite thing is just goofing around with the bike. Kept you waiting, huh? So I had next to no familiarity with Snake or Metal Gear when Brawl came out. I knew of the series, I knew it was a big deal, but I was mostly a Nintendo kid and I didn't have any interest in the series. Despite all that, Snake is one of my favorite characters to play in Smash. Setting up traps with his C4, his insane recovery height, his explosive moves and powerful attacks. He's just, pun intended, a blast to use. After he was cut from the roster in Smash 4, I never thought we'd see him again in this series. He was always an odd inclusion, and especially with what was going on with Konami and Kojima, Snake returning seemed like a pipe dream. And then we got the Everyone Is Here trailer, and there he was, finally back. I'm glad he's back. He'll probably be one of my mains again in Ultimate. Okay, so Ike was basically the one Fire Emblem character I was familiar with before his introduction to Smash, even though it was in a rather silly way. When I was a kid, my parents owned a video store, and I would often rent games from there to try. At one point, I saw Fire Emblem Path of Radiance and thought, wow, this looks cool, I have to try it. So I rented the game, took it home, and played it for maybe 5 minutes. I was so put off at the time by how it controlled. I was like, what? You don't control the fights directly? This is dumb. I thought maybe I was doing something wrong, but nope, that's just how Fire Emblem plays. And keep in mind, I was like 9 when I played this, so I wasn't exactly interested in strategy games at the time. Because of that, I returned the game with like 5 minutes of playtime and never looked back. At some point I want to go back and play this in Radiant Dawn now that I understand Fire Emblem, but Path of Radiance is kind of expensive. Maybe someday. And now for the character, or characters, that took the longest to draw so far. Usually a 3-hour recording session is enough time to record 3 to 5 characters, depending on their complexity. Pokemon Trainer took 3 hours, because there are technically 5 different characters that need drawn. I drew both the male and female trainer, Squirtle, Ivysaur, and Charizard, and I had to draw them all to scale so that they would look right both individually and as a group. I drew the male trainer based on Red's personality from the post-Gen 1 games where he's not a playable character. From what I understand, the trainer in Smash Bros. Isn't supposed to actually be Red, rather a generic trainer who just looks like Red. But, whatever, if I'm drawing Red, I'm going to draw him as Red. I was so excited to see his female counterpart also make an appearance in Ultimate. She's always had one of my favorite designs in the series, but since Red is the canon trainer, she's had maybe a handful of appearances. Maybe that'll change with future games, especially with the inevitable popularity boost Smash Bros. Will provide. Squirtle has always been one of my favorites since Gen 1. I kinda wish Ash's Squirtle was an alt costume, the one with the shades. That would be cool, but oh well. Ivysaur is fine, but I rarely pick the grass starter in Pokemon. I'm sure I've picked Bulbasaur a few times considering I've replayed Gen 1 and its remake countless times, but I prefer water types. Charizard was cool to see here, and I like how even when Pokemon Trainer didn't return in Smash 4, they still brought back Charizard. Though let's be real, I'll always associate Charizard with the one Ash had in the anime, the one that would always disobey him. A bit of a shame that the return of Pokemon Trainer means Charizard loses its Mega Evolution from Smash 4, but still, I'd definitely rather have the trainer and all of the Pokemon return. I'm glad the stamina mechanic is gone in Ultimate too, that's definitely gonna make me play as them more. Diddy Kong is a nice addition to Smash Bros, but he's a character I don't play much at all. Not really a ton to say here, he's cool and all, but with how many characters are in the series, some just don't get played as much. In terms of the DK games, I loved the Donkey Kong Country series as a kid, and Donkey Kong Country Returns is one of my favorite 2D platformers. To be honest, I prefer Returns over Tropical Freeze. I wanted to love Tropical Freeze, but I found it to just be kind of obnoxious with its level design a lot of the time. Maybe I'll give it another shot sometime. Like I mentioned with Ness, I haven't played any of the Mother games, and that includes Mother 3. I hear it's an incredible game, and I hope someday Nintendo decides to bring it to the US. Nintendo fans clamoring for Mother 3 to get an English release have been something of a meme in recent years, but I do hope that someday they get what they want. Sonic's announcement for Brawl was one of the biggest pieces of gaming news I've ever seen. He's in his 3rd Smash game now, and I'm glad he stuck around, but I still remember that October morning, waking up, checking the Smash Bros. Dojo as always, and seeing that character approaching banner. I don't talk about the series very much, but I do enjoy a fair number of Sonic games. Not all of them, obviously, but the ones I do like I usually love. Sonic Mania, Sonic 3 and Knuckles, and Sonic Colors are some of my all-time favorite platformers. Sonic may miss the mark a lot, but sometimes he hits a bullseye. I love King Dedede, even without playing the Kirby games. He's just got such a fun design, and I loved how he's characterized in these games. I've never been good at drawing him though, which is weird because he's got such a simple design. I feel like I got it right this time though. I didn't watch much of the Kirby Right Back At Ya anime, mostly because I don't play the games, but I do remember his portrayal in that show pretty clearly. When Brawl came out, I wasn't very familiar with Pikmin. Similar to my story about Ike, I think I tried Pikmin 2 once from my family's video store and just wasn't a fan. Between Brawl and Smash 4, however, I got Pikmin 3 on the Wii U and absolutely loved it. This got me to go back and buy the Wii versions of Pikmin 1 and Pikmin 2. I still need to go back and finish playing those, but that involves hooking up the Wii U and, yeah. I do hope 3 gets a Switch port at some point, though. I always played it with the dual controller setup, but I think they could work out a way for it to play without that. If nothing else, I really want Pikmin 4 to be sooner rather than later. Between Olimar and Alf, I tried to represent every type of Pikmin that appears in Smash Bros. Though speaking of Alf, I'm surprised they didn't make him an echo of Olimar. You could keep them mostly the same but give Alf rock Pikmin. It's also kind of a shame that Alf is the only captain from Pikmin 3 represented, when he's the least interesting of the trio. You know, having Brittany as an alt would have been cool. If I'm being honest, I've never been too fond of Lucario. He's fine, and I think his whole aura thing is interesting, but he's just not one of my favorite Pokemon. I do think it's a little amusing that he has the same voice actor as Goku, though. That's the closest we'll get to Goku in Smash. Part of my lukewarm thoughts on him might just be from the fact that I'm not a fan of the Gen 4 Pokemon games. Maybe I'd like them more if I played Platinum version instead of Diamond. I love Rob being included in Smash Bros, even if I'm not very good with it. It's fun to use, but it's one of those characters where I have a friend that's way better with the character than me, so I tend not to play as it. I didn't grow up with the NES, so my introduction to Rob was actually in Mario Kart DS. Seeing it return in Brawl was cool, and I love how they were worked into the Subspace Emissary. For this video, I'm going with the NES-colored Rob. In the Japanese versions of the Smash Bros. Series, Rob's default color is the Famicom one, but I'm going off the Western design. Toon Link was one of the most surprising inclusions in Brawl, partially because Young Link got cut, so I wasn't expecting to see another Link, but also because he just seemed like an odd inclusion given Brawl's more realistic art style. He's a very stylized character, and that clashed with Brawl's visuals. His updated look in Smash 4 and Ultimate is much better and closer to the original design. Though I'd be lying if I said I didn't have a soft spot for weird, slightly realistic Toon Link. In terms of gameplay, he's one of my favorite characters to play. I play him more than Link, he's just more fun to use. I love the visual style of Wind Waker, it's been one of the biggest influences on my own art. And last but not least, Wolf. I prefer playing as Fox over Falco, but I also prefer Wolf over either of them. Fox is fast and fun to use, but Wolf is just more satisfying to land hits with. I always preferred the version of Wolf from Star Fox Assault, where he's a little more mellowed out and more of a rival to Fox rather than being a full-on antagonist. His updated design in Star Fox Zero and Smash Ultimate is so good though, and I like the characterization he has now. Star Wolf's theme has to be one of the best Nintendo songs out there, and the orchestral version from Star Fox Assault is just pure magic. Heck, most of that game's soundtrack is fantastic. To finish up this video, it's time to put all the pieces in place. Brawl has had the most adjustments to the layout thus far, with a lot of characters being in completely different spots compared to the sketch. As the previous episodes have had small adjustments, those add up, and everything above those changes is going to get adjusted more and more as a result. Once again, everything ended up taking less space than expected, which is good. We're 3 episodes in, and given how massive Smash 4's roster is, the next episode is going to be quite a doozy. Hey everyone, welcome to Dalton Draws, a series where the title tells you exactly what the show is. This is part of a 5-episode series for Super Smash Bros. Each episode will cover characters introduced in a different game in the series. This week's episode focuses on all the fighters added in Super Smash Bros. For Wii U and 3DS. This episode somehow took the longest without feeling like it took that long to make. Part of that is because I had been working on the project for about a month before I started making the videos, And the roster for Smash 4 in particular was just gigantic. Melee took the longest to draw because there were so few simple character designs, and the time each character took to draw left me pretty unmotivated to continue back then. Smash 4 added the most characters in the series, but a lot of them had simple designs, so there were at least some recording sessions where I could finish 5 or more characters easily. But on the flip side of that, Smash 4 also had a lot of characters with gender swaps or other variations that needed to be drawn. My policy on drawing these is the same as in Part 3. I'll draw one male and one female version of each character when that applies, and I'll be drawing the 7 Koopalings. The Koopalings were what I was dreading drawing the most, but they ended up not being so bad. That being said, I still had to draw the variations for Villager, Wii Fit Trainer, Robin, Corrin, and the Mii Fighters, and those all added up. Still, in the end, it wasn't too bad. Smash 4 didn't just introduce a ton of characters, it also added some of my favorite characters and some of my mains. We're kicking things off with one of my mains, actually. I've wanted an Animal Crossing character in the series back in Brawl, so I was excited to see them headline the reveal trailer for Smash 4. Well, until they were overshadowed immediately after by the next character reveal. Still, it was great to see Animal Crossing get a character. The Green Villager was my main in Smash 4, and I've been playing them a decent amount in Ultimate too. Using Pocket to steal items and projectiles is just fun, and a lot of Villagers' moves are perfect for toying with opponents. They're a great addition to Smash, and one I'll continue to play. I don't play Mega Man, but man, it was hype as heck to see him appear in the Smash 4 trailer. Well, kinda. The stream was super glitchy when I was watching it, and I remember seeing like the intro to the trailer, a small bit of gameplay, and then it just jumped to Mega Man. It was like, well, okay, I guess he's in. That's all I need to know. I don't play as him much, but I'm glad he's in Smash Bros. I love the character, and I love the music, characters, and aesthetic of the series. That being said, I just don't have much fun with the games. They're great games, just not for me. When it comes to Mega Man, I'm more a fan of the Archie Comics run, which ended far too soon. Still, the representation the series gets in Smash Bros. Is awesome. Wii Fit Trainer was such a bizarre, hilarious announcement. I love that reveal trailer, and I never expected to see them join the battle. I don't play as them much at all, but when I first got Smash 3DS, I tried to main them for a while. I just love their playstyle and all their fitness quotes and animations. In the end though, I had more fun playing other characters instead. I might have to give them another try in Ultimate. Man, I hated Rosalina and Luma back in Smash 4. They were such an absolute pain to fight most of the time, and I remember a short while where they were just constantly who I would face in For Glory. Nowadays though, I actually don't have much trouble fighting her. Despite my complaints about fighting her in Smash though, I was so happy to see her added as a character in the first place. I liked the first Super Mario Galaxy and absolutely adored Super Mario Galaxy 2. The first game was fun and all, but for me it felt like it didn't really know what it wanted to be. Like, yeah, it had its identity with the gravity and space themes, but the level design felt like a weird in-between for the sandbox games before it and the more linear games that came after. Galaxy 2, on the other hand, I just constantly had fun while playing it. There's some things Galaxy 1 did better, but it felt like 2 knew what it wanted to be and excelled at it. But that's just my 2 cents on the matter. I know a lot of people prefer the first game, and both are fantastic. Little Mac was by far my most requested character for Smash 4, and I was so excited when he was announced for the game on my birthday. I'm a big fan of the Punch-Out series. I didn't play the arcade games, but I loved the NES game, enjoyed Super Punch-Out, and the Wii game is one of my all-time favorite games. I actually do a thing at PAX West every year where I go to the classic console room and over the course of the weekend, I'll do a complete playthrough of the Wii game on a rental copy. This year I also did a bit of a showcase for my friends to show them some of the highlights of the game. It's just a blast. As for Little Mac himself, he's one of my favorite Nintendo characters. I love his redesign in the Wii game, and his dynamic with Doc Lewis is just fun to watch. He's fun to play in Smash 4, but his recovery is just awful. I'm so glad they improved that in Ultimate. One of my favorite things to do in Smash 4 was to use customs to max out his strength so he could 2-hit KO opponents. When Greninja was announced for Smash 4, I was excited. I wasn't the biggest fan of Greninja yet. I had used a Fennekin in my Pokemon X playthrough, so I got the lamest final evolution of the trio. But as I've shown in some of my other art videos, and just some of my other art in general, I was a fan of the XY and XYZ seasons of the Pokemon anime, which introduced Ash Greninja. That quickly became one of my favorite Pokemon designs and one of my favorite inclusions in the anime since the original few seasons. In the time since then, Greninja has become a staple on my Pokemon teams, and I used Ash Greninja on my team in Sun and Moon. I still never got good with him in Smash though. His side B would always mess up my attempts at recovering. I decided to give him another shot in Ultimate though, and now I'm actually really enjoying him. He's fun to use. Every time I watched videos about Smash Ultimate, both before and after the whole Everyone is Here trailer, there was one sentiment I kept hearing. People being like, it would have been fine if Mii fighters were cut. Everyone is Here didn't need to include them. And that always bums me out. Miis were one of my favorite additions in Smash 4. My attitude towards custom moves and stats has been on display throughout the video series, and making goofy Mii fighters was definitely part of that. But you know, not all of them were meant to be goofy. Two Miis I used a lot both in 4 and so far in Ultimate have been Wonder Red and Professor Layton. They were two of my most wanted characters in both games, and it's still nice to be able to play as them in a sense with Miis, even if I would much prefer the real deal, of course. Of the three types of fighters, the Brawler is my favorite, especially in Ultimate. They changed up a few of the moves, like giving the Brawler a suplex and a counter where they slam the opponent into the ground. That's just awesome. Mii fighters might not be everyone's cup of tea, but I'm glad they're in the series. Palutena easily had my favorite newcomer trailer for Smash 4. I've wanted a Smash Bros. Anime for the longest time, and the trailer gave us a taste of that. Plus, it was animated by the team that made the Palutena's Revolting Dinner short for Kid Icarus Uprising, which was great. She was one of my most anticipated characters for Smash 4, and then she ended up not being very good. She had some cool moves, but all the good ones were locked behind custom moves, so a lot of the time I wouldn't be able to use them. Because of that, I never ended up playing her much. I hear she's much better in Ultimate, but I haven't had a chance to play as her yet, so don't take my word for it. I'll have to give her another shot. She's one of my favorite characters in Kid Icarus Uprising. And speaking of Uprising, Dark Pit got a lot of flack for being in Smash 4, but I was actually fine with it. This was before Echo Fighters made the idea of clones more palatable for a lot of people. But it was pretty clear looking at him and Lucina that they didn't take much time to develop, at least compared to your standard fighter. So it never really bothered me. It helps that I was familiar with the character from Uprising, where he was a genuinely good character, better than what I would have expected from that kind of dark clone kind of role. I feel like having his moveset be a copy of Pit's was a bit of a missed opportunity, since Uprising has so many cool weapons that aren't represented in Smash, but man, I am pretty sure people would riot if they gave him a full moveset. I'm glad he's in Smash, though part of that is because he brings his awesome theme song too. I gotta be honest, I'm surprised it took until Smash 4 for Pac-Man to join the battle. It seems like such an obvious inclusion, and I suppose having Bandai Namco involved in 4's development helped to make that happen. There's not really a ton to say here, but I'm glad they went with this design for him. It looks so good. I don't think I had played Fire Emblem Awakening at the time of Lucina's reveal for Smash 4. I eventually got around to it, I think later that year actually. I remember getting Fire Emblem Awakening for Christmas, around the same time as getting Pokemon Alpha Sapphire, and trying to play both games at the same time was kind of a mistake. That was my first Fire Emblem game, and it interested me so much more than Pokemon at the time that I made zero progress in Alpha Sapphire. As for Lucina in Smash, she's fine. I prefer her over Marth nowadays, though that might just be because I'm actually familiar with the game she's from. And then there's Robin. He's not one of my mains, but he's one of the characters that I want to play more of, because I love his playstyle. The mix of sword plays and spells is awesome, and I love Robin's design. During the sketch, I decided that for detailed characters like this that also have multiple versions, I'd draw one version facing forward and the other facing back. When I sketched Robin, I drew the female version facing forward, but for the final version I swapped the two. The reason for this is that it seems like the male Robin is typically considered to be the canon one, or at least the more popular design. I'm also slightly basing this off of Fire Emblem Warriors, where the Robin you get during the story is the male one, and the female version is an unlockable character. The opposite is true for Corrin later on, where I draw the more dynamic pose for the female version in that case, since she's more popular. But we'll get to Corrin soon enough. As a side note, I was actually kinda hoping to see Celica appear as an Echo Fighter for Robin, but there's plenty of Fire Emblem characters as is, so I'm fine with her not being included. Shulk's another character I'd love to get better with. I played him a decent amount in Smash 4, but never enough to consider him one of my mains. To be honest, I'm not really all that into the Xenoblade Chronicles series. I hear the numbered entries are supposed to be pretty fantastic, but the only one I played was Xenoblade Chronicles X. And to be fair, I liked it a lot, but that was in spite of the combat system, which I was just not a fan of. I liked X more for its gigantic world that was a blast to explore. Well, that and the giant mechs, of course. At some point, I'd love to play the first Xenoblade, though, and see what all the hype is about. And now for one of the drawings I was dreading the most, which actually turned out to not be much of a hassle after all. Bowser Jr. himself had a really simple design, nice and easy to draw. But my policy for drawing alts meant I wasn't just drawing him, I was also drawing Iggy, Larry, Lemmy, Ludwig, Morden, Roy, and Windy. I wasn't exactly looking forward to drawing 8 separate pictures. If they were all drawn separately like some of the other alts, I could have just made a whole Koopaling episode. That's why I decided to bunch them all up together in Bowser's Koopa Clown Car, rather than the junior version they use. You know, it's funny, in the time I've been part of the gaming community, I've gotten to see the hype when the Koopalings returned after such a long time, followed by the fandom's lowering opinion of the characters with each appearance since then. I like them just fine, but they're definitely not my favorite Mario characters. I like the way they were worked into Smash though, that's really cool. You know, I couldn't believe it when I found out the dog from Duck Hunt was in Smash. Well, the dog and the duck. And the guy shooting at the duck from off screen. It was such an out-of-nowhere inclusion, but I kind of love it. These two are a lot of fun to play as. I didn't play their game as a kid, but I did own that cartridge that had it and the original Super Mario Bros. On it. I never had an NES Zapper though, so I had no way to play it. They're not a character I would have ever picked for Smash, but I am so glad they're in the series. Alright, I'll get this out of the way right now. I don't play Street Fighter. I've played a bit of Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo, and I've played a bit of Super Street Fighter 4 on the 3DS. It's one of those series where I'll acknowledge that it's a great game, it's just not for me. The only traditional fighting games I've really enjoyed are games in the Versus series, like Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3 and Tatsunoko vs. Capcom. I've also only played a little bit of Dragon Ball FighterZ, but I've loved that. It's just a personal thing, but I don't like how insurmountable the skill gap feels when you start out in that kind of game. It just makes starting out not very fun, and that makes it hard to get invested in continuing. The Versus games definitely have that too, but there's at least enough there for me to still enjoy them. While I don't enjoy playing Street Fighter, I do love the characters in the series, and I'm glad Ryu made it into Smash. I thought that was such an awesome inclusion in Smash 4's DLC. But speaking of awesome inclusions in the DLC, I was blown away when I saw the announcement for Cloud. He was someone I absolutely never expected to see in Smash Bros. But, confession time, I've never played a Final Fantasy game. Not a single one. I think I might have tried a bit of Crystal Chronicles on the GameCube, but that's such a vague memory that I'm legitimately not sure. I do have a SNES Classic though, so who knows, maybe sometime I'll try Final Fantasy VI. Still, even without playing the series, I knew how big of a deal Cloud was. I love his design, and I love that he's in Smash. Maybe I'll play Final Fantasy VII when the Switch re-release happens, or when the remake is finally finished. Eventually. Or, I guess I should say, if the remake is ever finished. Between the announcement of Ultimate and the Everyone's Here trailer, I saw a lot of people suggesting that Corrin should get cut from the roster, and I don't really see why. Yeah, they're yet another Fire Emblem character, but they were pretty unique from the rest, and their game was one of the best-selling entries in the series, even if it wasn't a fan favorite. Personally, I loved Fates when I first played it, but my opinion of the game has only gone down over time. I guess when I was playing it, I was so wrapped up in how great the gameplay was that I kind of just overlooked the other aspects of the game. Still, even if Fire Emblem Fates isn't my favorite game, I like how Corrin plays in Smash, so I'm fine with their inclusion. Nothing could top Cloud in terms of being a surprising reveal, but man, I did not expect Bayonetta. How could I? She's a little more, she's from a more mature series than most Smash fighters. And not in the same kind of way as Snake either. Still, I'm all for unique characters, and she's certainly that. I haven't played Bayonetta or its sequel, but I really should, because from a gameplay perspective, I know I'd love it. Platinum Games puts out some wonderful stuff, and I love that style of gameplay. Just the aesthetic of the series doesn't really appeal to me, so it's hard to get interested, you know? Her design is awesome though, particularly the design from Bayonetta 2. And with all those fighters out of the way, time to edit them into the poster layout. This is where things really start getting filled in with the poster. The Smash 4 roster nearly doubled the size of it. I tried to put most characters into the spots where they were originally sketched, but with all of the changes made in previous episodes, the differences are really starting to pile up now. I might actually have to go back and adjust this part of the layout once I finish the final set of characters. Hey everyone, welcome to Dalton Draws, a series where the title tells you exactly what the show is. This is part of a 5-episode series for Super Smash Bros. Each episode will cover characters introduced in a different game in the series. This week's episode focuses on all the fighters added in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. I should make an important distinction right now because I know people are going to ask about this. Yes, I will be drawing all the DLC fighters, but none of the ones from the Fighters Pass will be in this video. That really should go without saying since only Joker has been announced so far, but as more fighters are announced, I'm sure people will be finding this video and asking, hey, where's so-and-so? The only DLC fighter in this video is Piranha Plant. The 5 Fighters Pass characters will get a separate video later on. My rule is that I'm going to draw them once there's an official render to use as reference. As for the characters that are in this video, Smash Ultimate has an interesting set of newcomers. Most of the fighters this time around are fan favorite requests, and feel more like they're filling in gaps in the roster from previous games. Admittedly, this is the least exciting set of newcomers to me because they were all fan favorite picks. I tend to prefer the slightly more, I don't want to say niche, because they're still Nintendo characters, but the less popular ones. But hey, a lot of people got characters they've been wanting for a long time. Just because choices don't appeal to me specifically doesn't mean that they're not good picks. Even before Smash Ultimate was announced for Switch, I think everyone and their grandma predicted Inklings would be in the next game. The Wii U didn't introduce very many potential new characters, and Splatoon was a breakout hit on a system that desperately needed one. As with some of the other characters, I'm only drawing one male and one female version of the Inklings. I personally prefer some of the other designs they used as alt costumes, but I went with the orange and blue since those are the default designs for each gender. I've played them a bit in Smash Ultimate, but I haven't been a fan of having to refill my ink so much. But having played plenty of Splatoon and Splatoon 2, that is pretty accurate to the games. I tend to use Ink Saver on most of my gear in Splatoon 2 just to get around having to refill all the time. I can't even count how many times I've run out of ink at the worst possible moment in a match. The Splat Roller is my weapon of choice for the most part, and that runs through ink pretty fast. Sometimes I'll mix it up and use the Splattershot Jr. or the Ink Brush, but the roller has been my go-to weapon for most of my time with Splatoon 2. I'm honestly surprised it took so long for Daisy to be added to Smash. She's been an alternate color for Peach for so long, and I'm surprised they didn't just make her an actual alt in Smash 4, like they did with Olimar and Alf. Though, I gotta be honest, I don't have much to say about her. I haven't actually tried Daisy in Ultimate yet. I play a lot of Peach in the game, but I also prefer her as a character, so I don't know if that's going to change anytime soon. I've played a lot of Peach in the sports games and other Mario spin-offs, but I rarely play as Daisy. Still, I'm glad she's in the game, even if she should have been added well before Ultimate. I honestly never expected to see Ridley make it into Smash. I was one of the people that thought Ridley was too big, and trying to shrink him down would mess with his design too much. That being said, the way Sakurai and the devs handled his design is pretty fantastic, and it manages to convey his scale without making him look, well, too big. I had a different sketch for Ridley initially, but I decided to go with this pose to better fit his size and reference it. He's drawn far larger than any of the other characters. Typically I used a 1700 by 1700 canvas for most characters, and a 2100 by 2100 for the more realistic characters. For Ridley, I went with a 3300 pixel wide canvas, which is the size of the entire poster. Most of that is being used for his wings, but it's going to allow him to be at the highest point of the poster and kind of serve as a ceiling for it. I didn't expect to see Simon join the battle. Well, until Nintendo accidentally posted Castlevania music the night before he was revealed. Whoops. But I'm also not too surprised by his inclusion either. He was another popular choice, especially in the Smash ballot, and the Castlevania franchise has a long history with Nintendo. If Konami was to get a second character, it was either him or Bomberman, though I would have loved if both had been playable. Also, his reveal trailer was incredible, even if it came at the cost of Luigi's life. I love how he plays in Smash Ultimate, and I love the design they went with for him. But I actually don't play as Simon much because I play as Richter instead. I like his design even more, I like his personality, and I like the slight differences in how he plays. That being said, I'm awful with him. I definitely have way more losses than wins using him, but he's just plain old fun to play as. The Holy Water is a great trick to bust out when the opponent gets too focused, and it helps to keep some range for the whip attacks. The cross and axe both hit way harder than you would expect, and while I don't get much use out of the uppercut, it's fun to land a hit with it. The real thing that tripped me up though is that he has a tether recovery, but it's not on Z like most other tethers. For a while I didn't know that all I had to do was just attack in midair to use it. But I'm getting better with him now, and I can't wait to play as him some more. Chrom was another fighter I expected to see in Smash 4, just because he fit in with the trend of the types of Fire Emblem characters set by Marth and Ike. You know, the blue-haired protagonist. But Lucina also fits that role, and I'm glad they went with her instead. But here he is, finally getting his chance. I was surprised he was a Roy Echo, but it works. Only thing I don't like is, oddly enough, the one move that makes him distinct from Roy. His up B doesn't feel nearly as good as Roy's. From an art standpoint, I'm split on his design. It looks cool, but it also feels needlessly complicated. That's kind of a trend with the Fire Emblem characters in Smash, where they looked cool but were a pain to draw. Once Chrom was finished, it's like a great weight was lifted, and I was able to easily finish the rest. I'll be honest, I'm not super familiar with Dark Samus. I know what the character is, but since I don't play Metroid at all, I'm not sure if they have a personality at all, or if they're just a silent monster or what. Still, what little knowledge I had was enough to focus on the corrupted suit aspect of the design. I tend to draw armor pretty bulky in my art, and I think that ended up looking pretty cool with Dark Samus. Plus, the color scheme ended up making things pretty easy to color and shade, which was welcome after Chrom. King K. Rool was probably the biggest fan request after Ridley, and he feels the most like a character that's filling in a gap in the roster. I'm not a huge fan of K. Rool in the Donkey Kong games, but he should have been in Smash for the longest time. He's Donkey Kong's most iconic antagonist. Well, I suppose aside from Mario himself and Donkey Kong Jr., Mario might be a little more iconic. I've only played a little bit of him so far, but I love how he plays. He's a total powerhouse, and all of his moves are super goofy. One of the best things Smash Ultimate did was bring in more heavyweight characters, and K. Rool is a great example of that. I expected to love playing Isabelle. I'm a villager main, and Isabelle is a great character in the Animal Crossing series, but to be honest, I still prefer villager. Still, I love that she's in Smash now. She's one of the least fitting characters to be beating up other Nintendo characters, and it's just hilarious. Just look at her. She's great. And now for the original Echo, and I'm not talking about Luigi. I prefer playing as Ken over Ryu, but I need more practice to really get a feel for playing as him. His moves are more rigid than I expected, but his speed and more kick-heavy moveset just appeals to me more. Plus, he's just got a cool design and personality. You know, maybe cool isn't the best choice of words, considering his trailer referenced Heat a lot, but whatever, you know. Incineroar was rumored to be in Smash for a long time before his reveal, and to be honest, I kind of didn't want him at first. Everyone insisted that a Gen 7 Pokemon had to be in the game, and they were ultimately right of course, but I don't know. I feel like picking a Pokemon to be a new fighter shouldn't always be tied to the current generation when there's hundreds of others to choose from. But then we got the reveal trailer for Ken and Incineroar, and my mind was changed. Incineroar is awesome, and a perfect fit for Smash Bros. Having a wrestling-themed character that's so over the top, it just works. and it makes him feel like one of the most standout Pokemon in the game. And now for the final fighter in this video, the first DLC character in the game, and probably the most surprising character. I mean, the wild crossovers Smash Bros. Is known for are huge and all, but how many people ever truly expected a piranha plant to join the battle? There's not a ton to say here since at the time of this video the character hasn't been released yet, but one thing is certain. I need to see what the Kirby hat will look like for this character. With all those characters finished, it's time to put the last set of characters in place. I finally had to increase the size of the poster to fit everyone. I was hoping to avoid doing that, but the poster was sketched before everyone was announced, and Smash 4 took up more space than expected. I'm considering making another version of the poster that would work better as a smartphone wallpaper. This one's just a bit too tall for that. Thankfully, all the characters can be adjusted and rearranged, so as I add the DLC over time, I might make adjustments to the layout. I'll probably keep Ridley at the top and the original 12 fighters in the same spots, but others can be moved. And with that, everyone is here. Everyone before the Fighters Pass, anyways. Those 5 characters will be saved for a later video, so no Joker yet. He's been announced, but I'm waiting for an official render to use as reference, just in case his design has any differences compared to Persona 5. So, what's next for Dalton Draws? This show got new life from all these Smash Bros. Episodes, and I'm hoping all of you will stick around for whatever comes next. Before Smash Bros., I had started drawing these frequent doodles of various characters from games, movies, cartoons, and more. You know, now that the poster is done, maybe that's how I'll continue Dalton Draws. I'll record those doodles and put them up in compilations like this. Heck, maybe I'll include the Fighters Pass characters in those. A question I got a lot while working on this was if I was going to sell the poster. I'm not planning to sell it, but I will make the full poster available on Patreon for anyone to download, regardless of if they're a patron or not. That being said, if you enjoyed the work on this series, I implore you to consider supporting my work on Patreon. I put lots of stuff on there. Full-res artwork, early access to my webcomic, frequent updates for patrons, and so much more. And all of that is available for just $1 a month. I want to continue making awesome stuff like this, and I need your help for that. Hey everyone, welcome to Dalton Draws, the series where the title tells you exactly what the show is. This is an addendum to my 5-episode series on Super Smash Bros., since on the day of this recording, the first character of the Fighters Pass is getting released. So today, I'm drawing Joker from Persona 5. Well, Joker and a few guests, to be exact. Now, I'm gonna say something everyone just loves to hear in these videos, but I don't play Persona. I'm really interested in 5, but I just never got around to it, and my only familiarity with the series is the Persona 4 anime. But just based on what we've seen, he looks like a pretty cool addition to Smash Bros. That initial trailer had already sold me on the character with just how stylish the animation was, and his moveset looks cool. I like how his guard and counter moves work, and his persona seems like a lot of fun to play around with. Joker is being released alongside the 3.0 update for the game, which includes some stuff I'd personally been hoping for. The video editor looks nice, but it still doesn't improve the process of actually converting replays to videos. At the very least, it seems like being able to upload videos will be easier thanks to this, so there's that. The big thing for me though is the stage builder. To be honest, the stage builders in previous Smash Bros. Games haven't been very good, but making dumb stages in them is always fun. The new builder looks so much better though. I can't wait to make some stages again. I'll definitely be making a Tetris stage immediately. There was a fun one that I made in Smash 4, but these new tools will let me make a much better one. Hey everyone, welcome to Dalton Draws, the series where the title tells you exactly what the show is. This is an addendum to my 5-episode series on Super Smash Bros. I'll be drawing the second and third characters from the Fighters Pass. It's Banjo, Kazuya, and a couple of the heroes from the Dragon Quest series. Truth be told, I haven't played either of these franchises before. My only experience with Rare's games on the N64 was a very, very small bit of Donkey Kong 64, and the closest I've gotten to Dragon Quest is playing Fortune Street on the Wii. That being said, I think I'll be picking up Dragon Quest XI's when that comes out on the Switch. I've always been curious about the series, and I've heard nothing but good things about 11. Since I don't have much to say about these particular characters, how about I talk about the event where they were announced for Smash? I loved watching all of the press conferences and presentations at E3. E3 2019 wasn't that great overall, and it definitely felt like something was missing without Sony at the show. But if there was one saving grace for the show, it was Nintendo. Well, that and the Final Fantasy VII Remake. I don't even play that series, and Square Enix has managed to get me so pumped for that. We'll see if it actually makes that March release date, but I sure hope it does. Anyways, getting back on track, I didn't expect too much from Nintendo this year. They had a lot of games already announced for 2019, so I was just expecting a Smash character and some updates on existing games. And honestly, even with only one first-party game announcement, they handily won the show. Of course, it helps when that one announcement was a sequel to Breath of the Wild. I loved that game. Heck, I've wanted to make a video about my first playthrough of the game for the longest time. We knew a Zelda game was in the works because, well, of course, there's always a Zelda game in development, but I wasn't expecting to see it this soon. And on the subject of Zelda, this is just a good year for the series anyways. Link's Awakening looks like a great remake, I still adore that art style, and Cadence of Hyrule came out just 2 days after the presentation. I may have no rhythm at all, but I loved that game, and I love that it's basically a licensed, official Zelda randomizer. That's just great. For me, the big game of the show was actually Fire Emblem Three Houses. I was a little lukewarm on the game based on what was known so far, but the info released leading up to and during E3 got me hooked. The Direct only showed a cinematic trailer, which gave some info on the story and definitely raised my interest, but what really sold me on it was the gameplay during Treehouse Live. See, I loved Fire Emblem Echoes, but it didn't sell as well as Awakening or Fates, so I expected a lot of the differences in its gameplay and presentation to be dropped for something more in the style of the games that had done well. Thankfully for me, that's not the case. The gameplay looks to be drawing a lot from Echoes, and it's bringing in some of the best additions from Echoes, namely the full voice acting and the ability to turn back time during a map. Plus, the Academy part of the game looks genuinely really interesting to me. It's probably not everyone's cup of tea, but personally, I can't wait to play it. The other big game for me was Animal Crossing New Horizons. I was ready for a new Animal Crossing game regardless of what form it took, but it's really exciting to me that it looks so good. Seems like they're adding a lot to the formula to really give players more to do, and I am 100% on board for that. As for a few other highlights, Astral Chain continues to look awesome. Platinum Games does some absolutely fantastic stuff, so I'm always down to try something new from them. I wasn't expecting to see Panzer Dragoon at all, but I've heard good things. It sounds like a game I'd actually enjoy. Luigi's Mansion 3 looks so good. Seems like they're taking what worked in Dark Moon and combining it with a lot of what people felt was missing from that game as well. The return of boss ghosts, the fantastic atmosphere, the varied environments, the charming cutscenes. Have you seen that opening cutscene? It's great stuff. Plus, the Scarescraper mode from Dark Moon is back. That was my favorite part of the game, and honestly one of the most fun multiplayer experiences on the 3DS. Plus it supports up to 8 players this time, which just sounds awesome. The Spyro Reignited trilogy was confirmed for the Switch, which I feel like everyone saw that coming, but it makes me glad I waited. I could have picked it up on my PlayStation 4, but I tend to prefer picking up games on Switch so I can have the option to play in handheld mode. Now, if something's a major graphics powerhouse, that's another story. But for platformers and adventure games, Switch will be my platform of choice. It's also the case for RPGs. If I end up getting Witcher 3 at all, I'm probably going to get the Switch version. I wasn't expecting an announcement for No More Heroes 3, especially not so soon after Travis Strikes Again. I'm glad that's happening though. I know that'll make a lot of people very happy. Trials of Mana is another announcement that I know will make a lot of people happy. I'm not big into the series, but I've seen a lot of people asking for that third game to get localized, so it's great to not just see a localization, but also a full remake. Overall, that's why I enjoy watching E3. Part of it is because it's such a big show and it's fun to see these companies come out with their biggest announcements trying to one-up each other. Hopefully with new consoles from Sony and Microsoft next year, they'll be bringing their A game. Though to be honest, I'm not really ready for a new generation yet. I just got my PlayStation 4 a little over 2 years ago, so I'm not in a rush to replace it just yet. But more exciting than a big announcement is a game that's going to make people happy, and it's great to see that happen, even in what wasn't one of E3's best years. And from the reactions I saw, these two Smash announcements made a lot of people very happy. Dragon Quest is massively popular in Japan, and Banjo-Kazooie is very important to Western audiences. So to see different audiences both get characters they've wanted for a long time was just nice, you know? I definitely wasn't expecting to have 4 Dragon Quest heroes to draw, though, that's for sure. That made placing these characters a bit of a challenge. I've also included editing Joker into the poster, since I actually forgot to include that in the Joker episode. Once we know the final 2 characters, I think I might actually completely rearrange this poster. I want to make it a little wider and maybe make it a little bit of a better size for a phone wallpaper. And as a reminder, I make the full resolution version of this available for free on my Patreon. It's free, but if you enjoy my work, I hope you'll consider helping me out by becoming a patron.
I wonder if I'll ever get to take a break.
Hey everyone, welcome to Dalton Draws, the series where the title tells you exactly what the show is. This is a continuation of my series on Super Smash Bros. Today, I'll be drawing Terry from Fatal Fury and Sans from Undertale. I should note right off the bat, Sans will not be included in the poster. The poster is only for proper fighters, but I know everyone was going to want to see me draw him, so I've decided to include him in the episode anyways. This episode is being released quite a bit later than I had originally planned. Terry and Sans were both revealed in the September 4th Nintendo Direct, and I planned to draw them pretty shortly after the Direct aired. But I had other work that needed to take priority, so I was going to draw them about a week later. Then, the day before I was going to record it, my laptop's hard drive died without warning. I had backups of the work files for the poster, thankfully, but a lot of other files were lost. Old commission work, personal art, even some recordings for an unrelated episode of Dalton Draws that's, well, scrapped now because I don't have the files anymore. So, I had to spend a few days moving stuff to a temporary computer while I got the hard drive situation dealt with, and because of that, I had to delay the art again to get back to work on commissions, since I only had a day in my schedule set aside for Dalton Draws. Long story short, this episode is cursed. So, how about I give my extremely late thoughts on the Nintendo Direct? Well, it was good. Nice to see Overwatch finally coming to the Switch. Luigi's Mansion 3 looks so good. I played that at PAX West and it was great. Super Kirby Clash was a fun surprise, and since it has online play, unlike the original 3DS game, I can actually play this one. Little Town Hero looks neat, but they picked a rough release date for it. There's just way too much good stuff coming out on the Switch right now. I can't keep up with it all. Moving along, I'm glad Tokyo Mirage Sessions is finally getting a Switch port. I was interested in it, but it came out at a time where I was just done buying anything on my Wii U. And then there's Deadly Premonition 2, which was a complete surprise. They also finally released Super Nintendo games for Switch Online, which has been a ton of fun. I've been playing a lot of Kirby's Dream Course with friends lately. Animal Crossing continues to look fantastic, and that Switch version of Xenoblade Chronicles looks really nice. And then, of course, there's the announcement that even more fighters are being added to Super Smash Bros. Ultimate after the Fighters Pass is complete, which means that this series of Dalton Draws is going to be continuing until the DLC is complete. Hey everyone, welcome to Dalton Draws, the series where the title tells you exactly what the show is. This time, I'll be drawing Byleth from Fire Emblem Three Houses. Cuphead will also be in this video, but just like last time, he will not be added to the poster. Part of the reason this episode has taken so long is that the reaction to Byleth's introduction to Smash was not the most positive. Honestly, that left me feeling pretty unmotivated to draw him. Well, that and how busy I was for a while. Not to mention the Fire Emblem characters have consistently been the most time-consuming characters to draw. They have some of the most needlessly complicated designs of any characters in the game. Byleth was a bit simpler than some, thankfully, but the designs still have a lot going on. That being said, I'm actually pretty happy to see Byleth make it into the game. They're far from my first choice, but I absolutely loved Three Houses. I went into it pretty excited and it did not disappoint. It was easily my game of the year for 2019. I played through the Golden Deer route on my first run, and I'm planning to start a second playthrough soon. Their inclusion meant a stage based on the monastery and plenty of Three Houses music, which I was stoked for. As for the character, they're pretty fun. I've only played them a few times, but I really like their moveset. Byleth also marked the end of the first Fighters Pass, so now that a little time has passed, how about I reflect a bit on the previous editions? Joker was really cool, but I haven't played as him much since he was initially added. Some friends still play as him a lot though, and I love all the extra flair he has. Those unique victory screens are a really nice touch. Banjo, I've barely played. I have no nostalgia for the character, and their moveset just didn't click with me. Still, I'm glad he was added though. He's a welcome addition for sure. I really like Terry. He's a ton of fun to play as, but I'd be lying if I said him having multiple side Bs didn't turn me away from playing as him more. I can't even count the number of times I've died from accidentally using the wrong one while recovering. Still, he's fun to play as, and he brought with him so much good music. Like, dang dude, he got me on a kick of just listening to all sorts of SNK music. Gotta love that stormy saxophone, dude. Of the newcomers, the one I ended up playing most is, surprisingly, Hero. I can't say I expected that, but he's become one of my mains in the last few months. He's just so much fun to play as. I love his moves, managing when to use the various spells, and his command menu is just so cool. I love whenever I'm able to bust out some sort of clutch spell with it, or just laughing with friends when I accidentally use Kamikaze or Zoom off the stage. There was one custom stage we played that had a gap in the middle, and I used Zoom and just shot right down the pit. It was hilarious. And of course, Thwack is amazing when it works. It's totally not fair, but I love it. I also picked up Dragon Quest XI's when that released and played through the whole thing. It's so good. I highly recommend it. So now we get to the part of the video where I add in the characters to the poster. Move some characters around, place both versions of Byleth, and call it a day, right? Well, that's where I was going to end the video, but you know what? I've been meaning to adjust the layout for a long time now, and with the first Fighters Pass complete, I think it's finally time to do that. Generally, things are staying the same, being based on what characters were added in each game, but the new layout is better suited to being used as a lock screen or wallpaper on a phone, something I know I've gotten a lot of requests for. I also used the opportunity to make a few tweaks to the art. A few of the characters didn't have outlines that were as thick as the other characters, but thankfully Clip Studio Paint has a tool that can add outlines around a layer. I also used that tool to help separate the layers of fighters based on the games. It's not the most graceful tool, but using it added a little more consistency and made the image look cleaner. I also made a few minor changes to two of the characters. For Palutena, I adjusted her face a bit and darkened some outlines. I wasn't too happy with the way it looked initially, but at the time I wasn't planning to redo any of the art for this poster. Now that the first Fighters Pass is done, maybe I'll go back and redraw some stuff? Maybe. I won't be taking requests for edits though. These will purely be to fix things that bugged me personally. The only other thing I've changed for now is Joker's art. Well, more specifically Arsene. He has this kind of ghostly smoke effect behind him, but every time I've added a character for the Fighters Pass, it's made putting anyone behind Joker a pain. I went in and erased that part once the smoke goes behind Joker, so it won't be an issue for me moving forward. Also, one last thing I've prepared. As was mentioned earlier in the video, the new poster layout is better suited to phones, so I've made a few phone wallpapers out of it. These will be over on patreon.com/smashtunes for free. That said, if you enjoy my work and want to help me continue with it, becoming a patron helps a ton. Hey everyone, welcome to Dalton Draws, the series where the title tells you exactly what the show is. This is a continuation of my series on Super Smash Bros. Today, I'll be drawing Min Min from ARMS and Vault Boy from the Fallout series. As with the last few updates, Vault Boy won't be added to the main poster, but who knows, maybe my stance on that will change if we keep doing these premium Mii costumes. I'm gonna say right now, there's no way I'm adding every Mii costume. Absolutely not gonna happen. That would be way too much work. But I think if they keep adding costumes like Sans, Cuphead, or Vault Boy, I might put them in the full poster in the future. That said, there is one extra character I'm adding, the Slime from Dragon Quest. I'll be blunt, this is entirely personal bias, but the Slime does appear in the hero's taunt, and I included Morgana and Arsene with Joker, so it's really only fitting, you know? Heck, even Toon Link was drawn with a fairy, so why not? Besides, the Slime is one of the most iconic designs in all of gaming. Even if you don't play the series, you know the Slime. That being said, let's get to the main focus of this episode, Min Min. Now, if you know me at all, you know that I'm a big fan of ARMS. I've done plenty of fan art for it, I've put over 200 hours into the game. I've played it on my friend Meds' streams countless times. There's 2 prior ARMS episodes of Dalton Draws before I even started doing commentary on these videos. Needless to say, I was pretty hyped for this news. So far, most of the ultimate newcomers have been from games I either haven't played or don't really have strong opinions on. I've been happy with every inclusion, but I didn't have the strong reaction to, say, Banjo that everyone else had. But an ARMS character finally got that reaction out of me. I had given up hope for ARMS getting into Smash. It was made too late to get into the base roster, and after the first Fighters Pass focused so heavily on third-party characters, I just assumed it was never going to happen. But then it finally got announced, and I was hyped. Min Min is the perfect choice, too. I know a lot of people were polling for Twintel, and personally, I thought they might go with Max Brass, but Min Min is definitely the most popular character in the roster, and also Mr. Yabuki's favorite. She uses kicks and can even reflect projectiles, which are natural fits for Smash, and the Dragon Arm makes so much sense for a natural way of including the charge-up mechanic from ARMS. And man, that trailer was so dang good. I was a bit anxious that we might not get a cool reveal trailer, given how unceremoniously an ARMS fighter was initially teased. But no, we got one, and it ruled! Min Min's one of my favorite characters from the game, but she's not actually who I play the most. I'm really a bite and bark main. Yeah, I main the worst characters in the game, but they're really fun to play as. That said, when I need someone a little faster, typically I'll switch to Springman or Min Min. I'm recording this video before I get to play the DLC, but based on Sakurai's presentation, I'm really impressed. The previous fighting game characters were all pretty faithful to their source games, and Min Min seems to be following that trend. It's really interesting seeing just how directly they put the gameplay of ARMS into Smash. Between the weapon swapping, the reflecting kick, the charging up with grabs, aiming the individual punches, it's just super cool. The way I had envisioned it was that the different types of arms would be the special moves, but I think this is way cooler. And then there's the music. Dude, the ARMS soundtrack is so good. Pretty much every song in the game rules. There's a reason why Sakurai basically put all of it into Smash. Before the DLC was announced, I felt like this was one of the areas where Smash's vast library of music was kinda lacking. I was stunned not a single ARMS song was in the game before this. It always felt like a weird exclusion, but hey, better late than never. And on that note, as excited as I am about ARMS and Smash, I'm more excited by the fact that Nintendo felt it was worth including at all. Alright, hear me out on this. ARMS didn't make the base roster because the timing was off. It wasn't in the first wave of DLC. You might be surprised to learn that ARMS sold decently well, despite the, joke about it not having legs. Despite selling over 2 million copies, it hasn't exactly been relevant in a while. But now, 3 years later, Nintendo still felt it was worth adding to Smash Bros. Above other more recent and popular options. That implies to me that they still see value in it as a series. Honestly, I felt like ARMS could benefit from a sequel. You could refine the gameplay and add in more content to address the main complaints about the original. And if Nintendo feels like it's still worth adding to Smash in 2020, that makes me think a sequel is still on the table. Or maybe we could finally get those graphic novels that were supposed to launch last year. I actually tweeted about that recently, and the tweet took off way more than I had expected. People want this, and if Smash is part of their attempt to build up the ARMS series, finally releasing the graphic novel might be the next step. There's an audience for it, and I know I'd buy it day one. Still, if nothing else, one of my favorite Switch games finally has a character in Smash, and I'm so happy about that. Can't wait to see who the next character is.
Hey everyone, welcome to Dalton Draws, the series where the title tells you exactly what the show is. This is a continuation of my series on Super Smash Bros. Today, I'll be drawing Steve, Alex, Zombie, and Enderman from Minecraft. I'll also be drawing Bomberman from the, Bomberman series of games. Now, I'll be honest, I wasn't sure how I wanted to tackle this episode, because the Minecraft characters are very visually distinct. They're super blocky and pixelated, and while I think Minecraft itself is awesome, I've never particularly liked how the characters look in the game. With the characters making it into Smash and looking pretty much identical to the source material, I had to consider my options for how to represent that in the art. I could have made the shading blocky to match the pixelation. I considered making them as actual pixel art in A-Sprite, which is an excellent piece of pixel art software, I might add. But ultimately, I decided the best way to handle it would be to just put my own spin on the character designs. This way, they would fit in with the rest of the poster without losing what makes them so unique. Not to mention, I've been applying my own style to these characters from the beginning. Adding detail or simplifying things to make them mesh well together has been part of the process all along. I did have to be a bit careful in how I handled that, though. I wanted the characters to look appealing and not like, well, how they looked in Telltale's Minecraft story mode. So, I never got into Minecraft. What a shock, another episode where I say I haven't played the game the character is from. I know. I always wanted to play it as a kid, but back then I had a terrible laptop that would overheat playing something as simple as Team Fortress 2. Even with how simple Minecraft is, I just knew my laptop couldn't handle gaming at all. I always wanted to try it though. I just love creating stuff, and Minecraft seemed like the kind of game that I would love, but I just never got it. I watched stuff like PBG's Minecraft Hardcore series, and I loved seeing the cool stuff people would make in it, but even when I got a better computer, and even when it came out on systems I actually owned, I just never bothered picking it up. I do have some familiarity with a very similar game, however. Earlier this year, I bought Dragon Quest Builders 2 on the Switch, and I have been loving that. It's basically Minecraft, but with the Dragon Quest aesthetic and light RPG elements. I really love the chibi character designs they went with for the game. I think that's a great fit for a game like this. But speaking of a game with chibi character designs, you have no idea how excited I was to see Bomberman be announced as the next character to get a high-quality Mii costume. I really wanted Bomberman to be playable in the game, and was gutted to see him announced as an assist trophy right away. But I'm absolutely fine with him being a Mii costume, and the idea of making a custom Bomberman stage and having matches using only the cross bombs, that sounds like a ton of fun. I should note, I only drew the default color for him, but the game does have various other color options. So, it's time to add everyone to the poster. As I was adding these 4 Minecraft characters, I decided to finally make a call that's been on my mind for a while. I'm adding in the characters that got premium Mii costumes. Basically the ones that are proper model swaps and not just outfits. Sorry, Travis. I know some people won't like that, but look, they're as playable as anyone else in the roster. And other non-playable characters like the Slime or Link's Fairy are on here, so why not? A character as iconic as Bomberman has to be on here, you know? And besides, I've been saying for a long time, I want Wonder Red in Smash, and if that's ever happening, it would absolutely be a Mii costume. As for who they'll add next, we'll have to wait and see.
Hey everyone, welcome to Dalton Draws, the series where the title tells you exactly what the show is. This is a continuation of my series on Super Smash Bros. Today, I'll be drawing Sephiroth from Final Fantasy VII. For anyone expecting me to give in-depth thoughts on him or the series though, you're out of luck. I know it's practically my catchphrase at this point, but I've never played Final Fantasy VII, or a Final Fantasy game for that matter. I was planning to play the remastered version of Crystal Chronicles that came out earlier this year, but then it turned out to be, well, a pretty terrible port of the game. I did pick up Final Fantasy VII Remake, but I haven't gotten around to playing it yet. What I can say is that I'm very happy he was added to the roster. We can always use more villains, and I love that his inclusion led to more music for the series. Plus, the reveal trailer was incredible. Cloud didn't get a cool CG trailer in Smash 4, but Sephiroth got one of the best trailers of any character. That's about all I can say on him, though, if I'm being totally honest. So instead, I'll talk about another RPG I've been playing lately. Recently I had a back injury that left me unable to work for like a week, so I spent that time playing through Yakuza Like a Dragon. It's very inspired by Dragon Quest. Heck, the protagonist frequently references those games by name. But those influences aren't just surface level. It's an incredibly good, surprisingly traditional JRPG. It's super goofy, but with a surprisingly gripping, emotional story that kept me hooked from beginning to end. Even if you haven't played the previous games in the series, I highly recommend it. But back to Sephiroth, he was announced at the Game Awards.
They aren't exactly the most prestigious show out there, but in a year with very few gaming events, I was definitely looking forward to it. I enjoyed it well enough, but I gotta say, it always bugs me how little the awards matter. Everyone tunes in for the announcements, sure, but the way the show just glosses over some awards and shunts others off to the pre-show entirely, it's just kinda shitty, you know? Then there's the celebrity guests, which really just added nothing to the show. I don't know. Like I said, I enjoyed it well enough, but some of the stuff definitely bugged me more than usual this year. So one last thing as I put Sephiroth into the poster. You might have noticed that I'm not adding Geno in this episode. I thought for sure he'd be one of the high-quality Mii costumes like Sans or Bomberman, but nope. They just brought back the costume from Smash 4. I know he was a highly requested character for some reason, but he's not a fighter, and he didn't get a premium costume, so unfortunately he has to be left out. If by some twist of fate he ends up being a character later on, I'll add him, but for now, we'll be ending the episode here. No! Hey everyone, welcome to Dalton Draws, the series where the title tells you exactly what the show is. This is a continuation of my series on Super Smash Bros. Today, I'll be drawing Pyra, Mythra, and even Rex, all from Xenoblade Chronicles 2. So, going into this episode, you're all probably expecting me to say something along the lines of, I've never played Xenoblade Chronicles 2 before. And you'd be right, but there is more to say on the topic this time. As you might recall from the Smash 4 episode, I mentioned that of the games in the series, I had only played X on the Wii U. But that's changed in the last few months. One of the games I got for Christmas this holiday season was Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition on the Switch, so I only just recently started that. I do intend to play the sequel at some point, but it's not going to be until after I'm done with the Definitive Edition. Last time I talked about the series, I did mention that I wasn't a fan of the combat in X, and that still holds true for the first game as well. I think it's better here, and they do a better job of explaining things, but it still just doesn't really pull me in. It doesn't help that I went into this right after playing Yakuza Like a Dragon, which did traditional turn-based battles extremely well. I just prefer that kind of battle system. But I'm still sticking with the game because of the story. I like most of the characters so far, and I'm definitely invested in seeing where this all goes. Even if parts of it have already been spoiled for me over the years, I don't have context for that stuff yet. Plus, I've gotta say, the Definitive Edition just looks really nice. The redone character models look so good, and I think it strikes a good balance between these stylized characters and these slightly more realistic environments. It looks great, especially for being an upgrade of a Wii game. Finding the time to play a giant RPG like this is a bit of a challenge to say the least. And speaking of time, these characters took so freaking long to draw. When they made the comment in the presentation about how they might be the most complicated designs in the game, I thought that was an exaggeration. At a glance, they don't seem that detailed to me. But then I started drawing them, and all of the little intricacies of the design snuck up. And that's not even getting started on the sword. I was not ready for this. If you keep up with the community tab or follow me on Twitter, you know that I intended to release this episode about a week or two prior to when the video is actually being posted. And there's two reasons for that. One, working on YouTube videos is not my job. It's something I do for fun on the side. I have other work I need to do to pay my bills, so I couldn't always invest the time that was needed to make this episode. But even when I did have time, it didn't matter because these characters took forever to draw. Okay, let me paint a picture for you. Figuratively, I realize I'm already doing that literally with this video series. So, when I was working on the initial episodes for Smash Bros., not counting the DLC, I drew several characters in a single recording session. Usually those sessions would last like 8 hours, and each character would take anywhere from about 30 to 90 minutes to draw. Some took less time, like Pichu or Mr. Game & Watch. Some took longer, like any of the Fire Emblem characters, or ones like Pokemon Trainer where I had to draw a bunch of characters as a group. Up until this point, the longest recording session to be spent on a single character was Sephiroth, who took about 4 hours. But that was kind of a technicality. My back was messed up at the time, so I had to take more breaks than normal, and I also had dinner during the recording. Then we get to this episode. Pyra and Mythra took about 6 to 7 hours to draw. Let me be clear, I'm not saying the session was 6 to 7 hours overall, I'm saying each character took 6 to 7 hours. I had even changed my recording format so that I didn't have to draw them all at once. They still took that long. That is not counting any breaks. No breaks at all. 6 to 7 hours per character. I could only record drawing one of them per day because of how long they took. Working on this poster started as a fun side project, but stress has definitely affected my drive to keep working on it. I'll finish it, but unless a third Fighter's Pass gets announced, there's only 1 or 2 more episodes left of this miniseries, depending on if the remaining fighters are announced separately or together. I don't necessarily want to do any more big continuing series like this one in the future. Instead, future episodes would probably be split into 2 styles. The first would be shorter episodes compiling the various pieces of art I post on Twitter all the time. Kinda like Smashtoon's Sketchpad, a series I tried to start up a few years back but didn't keep around. Who knows, maybe I'd even revive the branding for that. The other style is going to be like the Harvest Moon 64 episode I released recently. I did a deep dive retrospective on a game I loved as a kid, drawing a bunch of characters and talking about my experiences with the game, even adding in dozens of additional sketches throughout to illustrate what I was talking about. The episode was a total passion project and had a ton of work put into it, and even though it's my least viewed video in years, that's the direction I want to take the series moving forward. There's so much negativity on the internet, and I don't want to add to that. I want to do more retrospectives, more deep dives into the games, shows, and movies I love, regardless of whether or not people watch it. But that's enough serious talk. These characters were announced at the start of the February 17th Nintendo Direct. It was the first Nintendo Direct in nearly a year and a half, and man, I am so glad those are back. While the lack of major general directs in 2020 sucked, it also made sense, you know? There was, some stuff going on in 2020 that really interrupted a lot of plans for everyone and everything. We still got smaller presentations throughout the year. Indie World streams, mini directs, partner showcases, even one for Super Nintendo World, which looks amazing. And between the logistics of lining up the games to show, filming, recording voiceover, translating, and game delays, both from Nintendo and from other publishers, making a big presentation full of games and release dates, it just wasn't very feasible. And there wasn't even an E3 to justify a big Direct live stream. Not that E3 even confirms a Direct, as we saw in 2016. Regardless, things are different now. People and companies have had time to adjust, and Directs are back. I know it might seem silly to care so much about what's essentially a bunch of advertisements for video games, but I still really enjoy watching these streams, and I've been watching them for years. Not to mention that having Directs finally return after such a long absence, it felt like a step towards things returning to normal. We're not there yet, but there's a light at the end of the tunnel after so long. It's been a long year. As for the Direct itself, I enjoyed it. It wasn't this huge barrage of first-party reveals that I think some fans were expecting, but it was never going to be that. It was just getting back into the swing of things. An average Direct. Going in with those kinds of expectations, I thought it was good. Maybe it was a little overstuffed at 50 minutes long, but there was definitely stuff in there that I'm excited for. It's nice to see that Fall Guys is finally coming to the Switch. I'll be honest, I fell out of that game super fast. We just took too long to add new stuff, and by the time Season 2 started, I just wasn't interested anymore. Plus, I don't know, I found that unless I was playing with friends, it was more frustrating than fun, and there were just so many mini-games that would pop up where I'm like, oh man, come on, this one? Maybe the later seasons are better, but I haven't played again to find out. Maybe I'll give it another shot on Switch, though. I'm surprised that Famicom Detective Club is getting localized, but I'm very interested in those games. Monster Hunter Rise looks incredible, and I mean that both visually and in terms of gameplay. It looks great for a Switch game, and gameplay-wise, it seems like exactly what I wanted from the series. I got into Monster Hunter on the Wii U with 3 Ultimate, and then I played the 3DS games and absolutely loved those. I was really excited for Monster Hunter World on the PS4, but man, I feel like I'm the only person in the world that just did not like that game. I really wanted to, but I had all sorts of gripes with how the multiplayer was set up in the game. They tried some nice stuff like allowing multiplayer in the story, but I just hated the way it was set up and the whole like, oh, you gotta wait for the cutscene thing before you can let any other players in. It just let me play with my friends, man, come on. Ultimately, I just ended up wishing they had kept the structure from the previous games. From what I've seen of Rise, it seems like the gameplay is closer to the games that I liked, while bringing in a number of quality of life improvements from World and some fun mobility stuff with the wire bugs. I loved the demo of it, and I am so ready to play the full game. I'm also surprisingly excited about Mario Golf Super Rush. When it comes to Mario Sports, the golf games have been consistently great, and it's been a long time since they were available on a home console. I loved World Tour and the 3DS, and I'm also in the group that loved Mario Tennis Aces, so I'm really excited to play this game for myself. To be honest, it kind of reminds me of 100-foot robot golf, which is great. I'm also looking forward to story mode. I'm hoping it's a little more in-depth than the pretty limited adventure mode from Mario Tennis Aces, but regardless, I'm looking forward to it. No More Heroes 3 looks great. I kinda love that World's End Club just sounds like Danganronpa, but the characters decide not to participate. I think that's fun. Miitopia coming to Switch is a nice surprise. I never played the original because I kinda remember reviews treating it more like a serious RPG rather than the goofy fun it's meant to be. But everything I've seen from my friends that played it on 3DS, that's just got me so excited to try it for myself. It also makes me want to see more 3DS games upgraded for Switch. Like, come on, give me Kid Icarus Uprising, or the Zelda remakes, or heck, I'd love to see Codename Steam on a system that could actually do some justice to that Jack Kirby-influenced art style. That's a great game that just did not look good on the 3DS. And then there's Skyward Sword coming to the Switch. I know it's not everyone's favorite Zelda game, but I am so ready to revisit it. Anyone who knows me knows that I absolutely adore Skyward Sword. It's one of my favorite entries in the series. I never had any trouble with the motion controls. I love the characters, the music, the story, the world, all of it. It's got a more linear design philosophy than other Zelda games, but I think now that we've had the exact opposite in Breath of the Wild, it's easier to appreciate what it's going for, since we know that linear isn't the direction the series is heading in. It's just its own unique thing, it's its own experience, and that's fine. And hey, if you hated the motion controls, they're optional this time. It's not for everyone. I know some people that absolutely despise the game, but others love it, and that's the group that I fall into. I'm ready to go back to Skyloft. The direct was capped off with the announcement of Splatoon 3. I wasn't a big fan of Splatoon 2, but the trailer for the third game has definitely got my attention. It looks way more interesting to me already, at least in terms of aesthetic. We'll have to see if the other levels manage to be as interesting, but it's going to be quite some time before that releases. So that wraps up my thoughts on the Direct, and it's about time to wrap up this video. As I finish up though, I want to mention why I'm adding Rex, since he's not playable. For previous fighters, I've tended to include characters that appear in their taunts. Toon Link's Fairy, the Dragon Quest Slime, or Morgana with Joker to name a few. Generally, I've treated these as an optional inclusion, because who's going to complain if I don't draw Toon Link's Fairy? Well, probably someone, I'm sure. But either way, Rex falls into that category. I don't include characters from Final Smashes because a bunch of characters have Final Smashes that summon a whole lot of characters from their own games just for that single animation. But Rex happens to appear in taunts, Final Smashes, and victory screens. He's in enough of their animations that I felt the inclusion made sense. I had also considered redrawing some of the old characters for this episode. There were some additions people had suggested that made sense, but since this episode took so long with the 3 characters already in it, I've decided to hold that off for next time. Hey everyone, welcome to Dalton Draws, the series where the title tells you exactly what the show is. This is a continuation of my series on Super Smash Bros. Today, I'll be drawing Kazuya from the Tekken series. I'll also be drawing Shantae. So right off the bat, I should probably clarify why I'm drawing her. Generally, my rule has been that the only Miis I'm including are ones that are considered premium costumes. But what exactly qualifies as a premium costume anyways? For the most part, it's been the ones where there's a full model swap on the Mii character, and in most cases, the Mii also comes with a new music track. Sans came with Megalovania, and Cuphead came with the song Floral Fury. Vault Boy didn't come with a song, but was clearly a full model swap, so they were included. It's been a while since we got another one like that, but this most recent update has Shantae. She isn't a full model swap as the face doesn't change, but she does come with a music track, which is more than most other Miis get. So I'm going to consider that a premium costume and include it. As for Kazuya, I'll be blunt, I have nothing to say about him. You all pretty much know my catchphrase by now, so say it with me. I've never played Tekken before. I have played a bit of Pokken Tournament, but that's it. So instead, I'm going to talk about the E3 2021 Nintendo Direct, because that might have been my favorite Direct in a long time. They started with the Smash reveal, and while I don't really have a history with Tekken, I thought Kazuya was a cool choice. Moving on from Smash, I was really excited to see Super Monkey Ball Banana Mania announced. I've always heard from friends about how good the first few games were, so I'm looking forward to giving that a try. But then we moved on to a really exciting announcement in my book, Mario Party Superstars. I was pretty confident we'd see a new Mario Party at E3, but this is like my dream Mario Party game. Boards from the N64 games, mini-games from throughout the series, and online play? People have already pointed this out, but this really is what the top 100 should have been. I can't wait. This was followed up by what I'm sure was the most hyped news for a lot of people. A new Metroid game? That's big news in general. The game being Metroid 5 was even bigger news. But busting out the name Dread, a subtitle with a ton of history behind it? Now that was wild. I'm not even a Metroid fan, but that trailer has really got me interested. Maybe this will finally be the push for me to give the series a shot. Cruisin' Blast caught my attention. I've really been missing good arcade-feeling games for a while now. As a kid, I loved those kinds of racing games, and heck, I just liked arcadey sports games in general. I have a few streamer friends that I co-com with regularly, and I'm constantly trying to convince them to play stuff like NFL Blitz 2000 or NBA Street. That's just my jam. Then they showed a bit of Mario Golf Super Rush and teased the DLC for it. I've really been enjoying the game, and while I assume most people have been playing the Speed Golf mode, the part that I actually find the most fun is Battle Golf. That mode is awesome, and the Direct teased a New Donk City Battle Golf course. I need that ASAP, dude. Give me all of the battle courses. After that was a trailer for Monster Hunter Stories 2, which I ignored. I think the game looks incredible, don't get me wrong. But between the Summer Games Fest kickoff, Capcom's show, and the Nintendo Direct, there were 3 unique story trailers for the game, and with it releasing so soon, I don't want to see those. I felt like they were showing too much of the story at E3. I want to go in blind and experience that for myself. They showed a new WarioWare, that looks cool. Shin Megami Tensei 5 looks cool. Danganronpa Decadence looks like a solid collection. They seem perfect for handheld mode on the Switch. The biggest surprise of the show for me was Advance Wars 1+2 Reboot Camp. I never thought we'd see that series return, and was content with just playing Wargroove instead. But the remake looks so good! Apparently WayForward is handling the remake, and I love the direction they're taking with it. The toy-like aesthetic for the gameplay, the stylized 2D animation for the characters, it just looks so good. I'm absolutely picking that up, day one. The Direct ended with a string of Zelda news. The DLC for Age of Calamity looks neat, but I gave away my copy after finishing the game, so I'm probably not going to pick it up again. The game was great. I didn't give it away because I disliked it or anything. It was just a last-minute Christmas gift when a new copy wasn't in stock anywhere nearby. Skyward Sword HD continues to look like Skyward Sword. I know a lot of people hate that game, but I love it and can't wait to experience it again. I might even do a Dalton Draws episode for it in the future, who knows. The Zelda Game & Watch looks neat, but the real highlight was another look at the sequel to Breath of the Wild. I just said I love Skyward Sword, so that shot of Link skydiving through the clouds really got me excited for the game. We've already explored Hyrule, so expanding to the sky is awesome. Overall, I thought it was a really solid Direct. As I'm wrapping up, I should note that the next episode will be the final one for this miniseries. It's been a wild ride, working on this for nearly 3 years now. The final episode will include whoever the final character is, along with some redrawn characters. I have a list of characters I would like to redraw, so I'll probably be working on those in the months leading up to the finale. Hey everyone, welcome to Dalton Draws, the series where the title tells you exactly what the show is. This is the finale of my series on Super Smash Bros. Today, I'll be drawing Sora from Kingdom Hearts, as well as redrawing some previous characters for the final version of the poster. Since this is the finale, I guess it's my last chance to say that I haven't played any of the games Sora is from. Though, there's a bit more to it than that this time. I'm pretty familiar with the first game. I watched someone play it as a kid, I've watched a Let's Play of it years ago, and I've seen a few speedruns. I also have some familiarity with the later games, but I haven't played them myself. I have interest in the series, I just never picked any of the games up. As a kid, I wasn't exactly in a position to buy every game I wanted. and I personally want to play the series in release order. I have been waiting for Square Enix to release 1.5 plus 2.5 on the Switch to finally give the series a chance, since, personally I prefer to play RPGs on the system. But unfortunately, the games are coming to the system as cloud versions, so there goes that hope. Oh well. I ended up getting the all-in-one package on PlayStation, but between the recent Animal Crossing DLC and Guardians of the Galaxy, I haven't had time to start it yet. So, despite never playing the games, I know just how popular of a choice he was, and how unlikely he was, considering how complicated the rights to the series are. Which, in case you were wondering, that's why I'm not playing any Kingdom Hearts music in this video. I would love to play some original songs from the games, but I also really like not getting copyright strikes on my videos. Still, the reveal trailer for Sora was so good, and a big part of that was the music. That orchestral version of the song is beautiful. Since I wanted to take my time with this finale, I made sure to try out Sora and see how he played. He's a fun character for sure. His mobility in the air is wild, and it's interesting seeing how powerful he is despite being so light. He's fun, though I don't know if he's going to be one of my mains. I'm glad he's here though. He was a great final pick. Oh my god, I'm looking at the script and I misspelled light and pick. What was going on when I wrote this? So that's it then, the final character I had to draw, right? Well, not quite. I debated drawing Doomslayer, but since he doesn't come with any music and his costume doesn't have similar proportions to his actual appearance, he doesn't fit my criteria for drawing Miis. Speaking of which, I just want to take a moment to clarify that criteria. I know it's a little bit more technical than I tend to get in these videos, but bear with me here. I have 3 rules and a DLC costume must fit at least 2 of them. They have to be a full model swap of the character, their proportions have to be mostly accurate to their original appearance, and they have to come with a music track. These are what I use to determine if a Mii should be added. Sans was the original example, being fairly accurate to his original design, a full model swap, and coming with Megalovania. Bomberman and Vault Boy both lacked music, but otherwise were accurate model swaps. You could make the argument that Shantae doesn't quite fit, but her proportions are fairly close to her half-genie hero design, and she came with a music track. There are a few others like Gino or Travis Touchdown that I would love to draw, but they don't fit the criteria. And while Doomslayer is a full swap, he doesn't fit the other 2 criteria. Anyways, that's it for this overly technical section. That costume is awesome, but I can't just include one because it looks cool. There's others I would love to include, but I'm not making exceptions. Believe me, it's super niche, but if I felt like I could include the Chibi Robo costume with the rest of these, I would draw it in a heartbeat. That was one of my most wanted characters, but it doesn't fit. I can't play favorites. I mean, I can't. It's my poster, but I'm not going to. I have to draw the line somewhere. I've also had people ask me about removing the Miis entirely, and I've gone back and forth about it, but no, I don't think I will. Look, Mii Sword Fighter, Brawler, and Gunner are all fighters in the game, and I've included alternate costumes for other characters as long as they're a gender swap or they change who the character is. The Mii costumes I've included serve that same purpose. Anyways, that's enough of that. Now that Sora is done, it's time to make some final additions. First up, I'm adding in a suggestion that I've heard a few times over the years. Pikachu Libre technically should have been included. The game doesn't change the name, but I included other gender alts in the poster, and as Sakurai pointed out in the E3 2018 presentation, Pikachu Libre is a girl. I'm not going to include spiky-eared Pichu, however. It technically is a different Pichu, being one that was given out in an event in Heart Gold and Soul Silver, but I think its inclusion would just have people questioning why Pichu is in the poster twice. They're too similar. This one might be a surprise, but I'm adding Mr. Saturn. He's not a playable character, he doesn't appear in any attacks or taunts, but he is in the official mural for the game, so yeah. But just because those are the final additions, that doesn't mean the poster is done yet. There's a few drawings that have bugged me for a while, and I want to finally fix them up. Previously, I'd made some slight adjustments to my Palutena drawing, but these ones are being completely redrawn. First up, Link. Now, I actually really like the original drawing. I think it still holds up. So you might be wondering why it's being redrawn, right? Well, here's the thing. When I start these drawings, I use an image size of 1700 by 1700 pixels. For taller characters, I'll adjust the image size, and later on for more complex characters, I started increasing the resolution entirely. I wanted to maintain consistency in the line thickness and level of detail. But for the early drawings, I tried to stick to that canvas size without ever changing it. I did adjust it a little bit for Link, but not enough. The pose fits the dimensions of the image great, but he ends up being too small for the poster as a result. He's the only character in the final poster that is scaled up instead of down, because his illustration was just too small. So for this one, I basically just recreated the original image, but with a much larger canvas so that it would fit better in the final poster. But we're not done with the Links yet, because I also redrew young Link. So for the original, I tried to draw him similarly to his official artwork for Ocarina of Time, but as a result, I feel like the proportions are off, especially compared to other human characters in the poster. So for this one, I took more inspiration from the Ocarina of Time manga that I was reading at the time. Of course, that's the phrase I'd go with. Anyways, I tried to make him look a little bit younger, a little more stylized. I also used my chalk brush instead of the pencil ones to get cleaner lines without changing the aesthetic. Oh, and I added Navi. Guess that's another addition to the poster. Everything I just said also applies to Leaf, aka the female version of Pokemon Trainer. The original drawing is fine, but I don't know, it didn't look enough like the actual character to me. For this version, I changed up the pose a bit and used official artwork for reference. There was some recent artwork for a figure of her that was very helpful in figuring out how to draw her properly. Leaf's always been one of my favorite Pokemon Trainer designs, and I wanted to make sure that she was well represented on the poster. I couldn't change up the line thickness too much on this one, as it had to match the style used for Red and the Pokemon. In fact, I kinda just ended up redrawing Red as well. In case you were wondering why this episode took so long to make, it's because of decisions like that. The scope of it kinda just got out of hand. Oops. I debated whether or not I needed to draw Cloud again. The original picture is fine, and I like the pose showing off the sword, but I don't know. As I've been playing Final Fantasy VII Remake, I'm realizing that the pose doesn't really capture his personality, so I decided to redraw him with a more fitting pose and expression. I also based the drawing on old artwork from the original version of the game, rather than just his in-game model. For these characters where I'm taking inspiration from official art, I'm still using the Smash Ultimate design overall. The official art just helps me to better stylize it for 2D. So, with Robin, I had drawn the male version facing forward and the female version with her back to the camera. Corrin was the inverse of that. But of all of the drawings in the poster, these two were probably the ones that I was the most unhappy with. This is going to come up a bit with the next few drawings, but I have a tendency to draw armor a bit more bulky than it actually is in-game. That's just my aesthetic for how I like to draw armor. But on Corrin, it just made the proportions look all wrong, and I hate the pose I used. She looks cautious, which I think is fitting for her personality in the game, but the pose itself just looks awkward. So for the redraw, I reworked the pose to look more noble. And honestly, that transformed one of my least favorite drawings of the poster to one of my favorites. As for male Corrin, I'll be totally blunt, this was like the most half-assed drawing of the entire poster. Even the other ones that I was unhappy with were at least drawn with intent. Here, I had Corrin's cape cover 90% of the pose because I didn't want to draw his overly complex armor. I've complained before about how the Fire Emblem characters are annoying to draw because of their armor, and Corrin's no exception. Unlike before, however, I used his in-game model as reference instead of screenshots. That's the great thing about working on these now that the game is out. I can just load it up on my Switch, set the system on my desk next to me, and use the Joy-Con to move the camera around. It's a great reference tool. I also used their 2D artwork from Fire Emblem Fates and Fire Emblem Heroes as reference for their faces specifically. Alright, one last Fire Emblem character, Chrom. Remember what I said about drawing armor to be too bulky? Well, there's a bit of that here, but the main issue is that I made his outfit too loose-fitting. In the actual games, Chrom is a fairly slim character, and my art didn't really reflect that. That's partially because his Smash render makes the sock boot thing on one of his legs look baggier than it actually is, so I ended up making it the same size as his pants, which are actually supposed to be baggy. I also adjusted the pose a bit, and I think this is a better representation of him, though I'm still not a fan of his design. The Fire Emblem cast often have needlessly complex designs, and Chrom is my go-to example for that. Like, why are his boot, sock, things different colors? Why does he only have one sleeve? What is with all of these strap-like designs on his pants? What is with all of these straps? Learn to wear a belt right, idiot! You think you got enough layers over this arm? I'm exaggerating a bit here. It does look cool overall, but it's these kinds of details that make the Fire Emblem characters such a pain to draw for this poster. Well, you know, at least until the Aegis characters made them look simple by comparison. Alright, one last armor example. Here's Dark Samus. The original drawing isn't great. I think I leaned a little bit more into the monster elements to try and distinguish it from Samus, but in the end it just wasn't a good portrayal of the character. The armor was made way more bulky than it should have been, and the end result just looked like a generic armored shooter character. This new drawing adjusts the color scheme a bit and uses a way more on-model design for the character. As a side note, I finally played through a Metroid game. It wasn't the one Dark Samus is from, but still, that's one more game off of the Smash Tunes Has Never Played list. Dragon Quest is still the best example though, where I hadn't played a game in the series before drawing it, but now I've played a bunch of games in the series. I still haven't played a Persona game, but I do own a copy of Persona 5 Royal, and I've been playing through Tokyo Mirage Sessions. I'm also going to finally play Banjo Kazooie when that releases on the Switch. And with that, every illustration is complete. Everyone is here. Man, that's surreal. I've been working on this project for 3 years now. The earliest finished illustration is Mario, who was drawn on October 14th, 2018. But before that, I had sketched out a very rough layout for the poster on August 8th, 2018. The bulk of the art for this poster was drawn between October 2018 and January 2019. I would set aside a few days just to draw the characters, and the goal was to draw as many as I could in a day. The simplest characters took like 30 minutes, while the more complex ones took up to 2 hours. I'd turn on OBS and record the process. Then I would write a simple script for each video, usually giving some very brief thoughts on the character. I talk about how they played, or my history with the character, you know the drill. The footage would then be sped up to match however long I was talking about them. Making the first few episodes was a lot of work, sure, but it wasn't too difficult, it was just time consuming. But things did get more difficult with the DLC. Suddenly, I was working on only a few characters at a time, while still having to do the same amount of editing work for each one. Since there were less characters, I needed to write longer scripts. Every character announced was, at a minimum, a full day of work for me. And I don't do YouTube as a job. I don't sell this poster, so it cuts into my actual job as a freelancer. I've debated whether or not to include a rant in this video where I vent about the stress and anxiety the project has caused me, how it's affected my ability to actually enjoy playing Smash Bros. I feel like it's important to acknowledge all of that in this section of the video. After all, this video series is about the process of making the poster, and that's part of it. But I don't want to harp on it too much, because at the end of the day, it's wild to see just how much this poster has grown from the original version. And with these final additions, everyone is finally here. Thanks for watching this video series. Tune in next time for something else. As always, I'm not going to sell prints of this poster or anything, but I will make it a free download on Patreon. You don't need to be a patron to download it, but if you like my work, you should consider supporting it on Patreon.